So without further ado, we will go ahead and get started. Lauren Alvarez is an elementary school counselor at Jinx East Elementary. I used to work with Lauren, and when I started back working with Oklahoma Family Network, we partnered with her. And so she's so gracious to give up her evenings, and she's just was telling me she's been at a band camp all week. And so poor lady is very tired, but we appreciate you, Lauren, doing this. You guys are in for a treat. I learn something every time I hear Lauren. So please, thank you again, Lauren, for your time. And if you have questions, please put them in the chat and we'll try to get those at the end, but we will make sure we get those answered at the end of the presentation. Thank you for joining us this evening. And we'll go ahead with you, Lauren. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. Let me go ahead and share our presentation. I have a lot of different things that we will look at tonight. Okay, great. And I want and like to make everything as practical as possible. So hold on, let me just do one quick thing and we will get started. Okay, I'm checking to see if we have.
Okay, Lauren, ¿me puedes esperar? Can you wait a little bit? We can hear Alberto.
Oh, you can hear Alberto, but you can't hear me?
No, we can't. Yes, we can't. Okay, yeah, perfecto. Yeah, gracias. Thank you, Laura. Go ahead.
Is it working now? Okay. Okay. So, I, having just spent 5 straight days with high school band kids, I want as many people to have a good understanding of effective discipline as possible. They are great kids. There were a few that were, interesting, but they are wonderful children. And I'm so grateful that they have such involved families. So much so that the lady at the hotel said that it was the best group they ever had. So, and they wish us to come back. So that was really nice. But creative consequences, I think the thing that people struggle with is, what do I do for discipline? There's so many confusing messages out there. There's gentle parenting. There's, spare the rod, spoil the child. There's so many different thoughts and strong opinions about discipline. And so I, having taught parenting classes and worked with families for the last 20 to 25 years, I really have tried to come up with things that are as practical as possible. And that is what I want to share with you. So there'll be a lot of extra handouts that come along with this that you'll get, that you can look at, and even some links to some videos that kind of explain some of the different kinds of consequences, because I want you guys to have as many resources as you can. I teach classes for Family and Children Services. I also do things for Oklahoma Family Network in my school, and I love what I do. I've included my cell phone and my email on there, so you're welcome to contact me if you need that. Okay, so kind of our overarching thing to think about is, why do we parent? What is the purpose of our parenting? Why do we do this really hard job that we have to pay for? Nobody is paying me to be a parent. As a matter of fact, on average, from birth to 18, they said it can be about $100,000 per child, which I found to be very interesting. Our reason why we parent is to protect and prepare our children and teens to survive and thrive in the kind of society in which they live. So when I hear that definition, and I'm honest with myself about my parenting, and I think about, okay, if my day in and day out parenting style, how I react when there's a problem, how do I communicate, what are my rules that I have in the house, how do I enforce those rules, so many things that go into parenting. If my day in and day out parenting is just survival parenting, where I'm just kind of doing things that I'm not really thinking about it, we want the best for our children. We want them to grow up to be responsible and healthy and in good relationships and being able to take care of themselves, but that doesn't magically happen. So when I read this definition, that the purpose of parenting is to protect and prepare our children and teens to survive and thrive in the society in which they live, is what I'm doing every day actually preparing them? Is it protecting them? And in the area of consequences, in the area of discipline, the way I'm going to build responsibility. So responsibility means when I grow up, I can take care of my stuff. If I make a mistake, I take accountability for that. I can do the right thing when the situation calls for it. That's responsibility. If I want my children to grow up to be responsible, I love my children enough to let them experience the consequences of their choices. That actually helps them prepare for adulthood. When I grew up, I don't know what kind of household you grew up in, and my parents loved us as kids. They had a very strict, very harsh discipline style, which was very typical in the 70s. And so I knew I didn't want to do that to the extreme they did. I wanted some of the things they did, and I didn't want some of the things that they did. But I was very confused because my experience with consequences is they were always harsh. They didn't seem to quite match what happened. You miss one day of chores and you don't get your allowance for the whole month. Just more harsh consequences. But in my mind, I thought consequences are bad. No, consequences are good. Because as a grown up, I experience consequences. If I speed in my car on the road, I might get a ticket and have to pay that ticket. If I constantly show up late for work, I might lose my job. If I lose my temper and scream at somebody and throw stuff as an adult in Walmart, I might get arrested. As an adult, I experience consequences. If I spend money that I don't have, I might not have money to pay the bills. That's part of adulthood. So if we rescue our children from consequences, we try to make things easy on them. Oh, they're just a kid. They only get to live once. They only get to be a child once. All those things are true, but I want them to be prepared for adulthood. Consequences are not bad. Now, certain consequences are more effective than others. And what we're going to talk about tonight is logical consequences, and just really think through different kinds of consequences and why some might be more effective than others. But if we love our children, we love them enough to let them experience the consequences of their choices. That will get them prepared for adulthood more than anything. Also, I like to always, in all of my presentations, bring it back to the brain. Brain development, it runs everything. It helps us regulate our emotions. It helps us make logical choices. It helps us remember things. It helps us bond and connect with others. But so many of us do not understand brain development. There's different parts of the brain. There's the different areas. I always talk to kids and I call their amygdala kind of towards the back of their head. That's their T-Rex brain, their fight or flight. And right here in the front is your prefrontal cortex. That's your executive center. That's your thinking brain. We want our kids to use their thinking brain. But while the brain is developing, it develops from back to front. The last part of the brain to fully develop is the prefrontal cortex. So when our kids do these foolish things and we're like, why did you do that? Well, their brain is still developing, but they need our help. They need our help to make connections to help them learn and grow. This last part of the brain to fully develop, this prefrontal cortex, it's responsible for sound decision making. That means making good decisions. Empathy, having the ability to understand how someone else might be feeling, having the ability to understand how our behavior might be impacting somebody else. That's all part of empathy. It's also responsible for considering consequences. If this part of our brain is fully developed, we should be able to think, okay, if I do this, this might happen. If I throw this book at my classmate, I might get in trouble and they might get hurt. That's what considering consequences means. In children's brains, that is still under construction. So you'll see kids just do things without thinking. So that is where our parenting really helps. If they don't consider consequences, but we let them experience consequences, then their brain's like, oh, when I do this, this is what happens, because I teach them through the consequences. It's also the part of the brain that regulates emotions. So when I have a big reaction to something, this part of the brain can help calm everything down and think logically and problem solve. It's also part of self-awareness, being aware of myself, my actions, how loud my voice is, where's my body in space. That's still under construction. And morality, right from wrong. A lot of times, younger children, they consider something to be right or wrong, depending on what can I get away with. Am I going to get in trouble? Am I not going to get in trouble? All of that is a part of their developing morality. As they get older, they develop values and make decisions from those values. So the reason why I always like to bring up the brain is when our kids have behavior that is not okay. It's breaking a family rule or value. Someone else is getting hurt. It's unsafe. You have to remember they don't have a fully developed brain yet. And I want to help their brain development. I can help their brain development with great communication and bonding with them and developing a relationship, but I also help their brain development by letting them experience the consequences of their choices. So all these things fit together. It also helps you not take everything so personally. Sometimes it feels like kids are doing it on purpose to ruin my life. No, they're not. They are doing things on purpose with their underdeveloped brain. Your brains don't stop developing till you're 25 or 26. So, but when we look at a problem a child is having, we're looking at it through the lens of our adult brain and experience. They don't have that adult brain. They don't have that experience. They are learning. So it's really helped me as a mom not take everything so personally and also understand that it is normal to make mistakes and to misbehave. That is normal. To be honest, I would rather them get caught. I would rather them misbehave now. So I have an understanding of what stuff we still need to work on rather than them wait to misbehave when they're older, when I might not have the same level of influence if they're not living at home. So very important to kind of think about it that way. Now, your parenting style is something I mentioned a little bit ago. This is your day in and day out way of parenting. It definitely impacts the kind of consequences you have. All right. So if you're more of a dictator style parenting, some people call it drill sergeant parenting. It's all about the rules and the boundaries. These are the rules. It can be very inflexible. And there's so many rules, sometimes there's not enough flexibility. The adult is very much in charge of all the things. A lot of us, in our attempt to control our child's environment, in our attempt to keep them safe, we don't realize that too much control never allows them to make choices. If I make all their choices for them, and then they leave the house and go off to college or go off and get their own place, and then they make these huge mistakes because they can finally make choices for themselves, I'm like, I didn't raise you to be that way. Well, if you have a dictator parenting style, sometimes there's rebellion or delayed rebellion. They don't even have practice making choices because we made all the choices for them. So with the dictator parent, it's all about the rules. Now, rules are not bad. We need rules. We need boundaries. That's an important part of being a human being. But if that's the only focus and there's no flexibility, there's no adjustment, it's because I said so, that actually doesn't protect and prepare our kids like we think it would. A doormat parenting style, a lot of times there's inconsistent boundaries. Maybe they say, all right, this is the rule, we're going to bed at 9, but then it's 10:30 and there's really no consequence for it. So we don't enforce the boundaries. There's too much freedom. There's too much flexibility. And that can also lead to a lot of rebellion and a lot of poor decision making. Sometimes doormat parents don't have any consequences. And so the child grows up into adulthood and it can be hard to be around. They can go to work and not understand why everyone's giving them a hard time because everything's been made to be easy for them. The active parenting style, that's got a balance. I want to have boundaries and developmentally appropriate rules, but I also need to have flexibility within those boundaries. As a child gets older, they should have more flexibility if they're trustworthy. I shouldn't have to micromanage every aspect of their lives. Because what am I like as an adult? I have boundaries. I have rules in my job, in my marriage, as a parent, living in a society. I have laws that I have to follow, but I have a lot of freedom. I can watch whatever I want on TV. I can stay up all night if I want to, but The consequence will be I'll be exhausted. I won't do a very good job at my work. I might oversleep and be late. I have so much freedom. So learning to manage that freedom within boundaries is a really important life skill that we can let our kids experience. So consequences are not bad. Consequences are absolutely necessary. But there's some consequences are more effective than others. So tonight is about effective consequences, okay? Because sometimes we really want control. We don't have control, 100% control over our kids. We don't. What we have is influence. You can either have 1% influence, and which would be 1% power over our kids, or up to 100% influence. We had a class earlier in the month, the effective communication class. And I mentioned the same thing in that class. Effective communication really can increase your influence because you are more able to communicate your values, help your kids problem solve. It's effective. Just like if you're in a relationship and you have really good communication, man, the relationship is so much better. But we also have influence over our children by the kind of consequences we use. And even though kids do not like consequences and boundaries, if we combine effective communication, how you say it matters, if we combine all these different things, then it increases our influence too. Because if I let my children experience the consequences of their choices when they're kids, I'm influencing them to make better decisions as adults. So just be aware, we will never have control. As an adult, do you want someone to have 100% control over you? No, you don't. So if I want to prepare my children to be adults, I have to be willing to not have 100% control over them. But I do want to increase my influence. Okay? Now, we also talked earlier in the month about communication blocks and effective communication. How you say it in a discipline moment really matters. So if we're commanding, if we're using a lot of sarcasm, if we're acting like a know-it-all, if we're interrogating them, what did you do? And you went every last detail, if we're always focusing on their mistakes or we expect them to be perfect, we are jumping in to advise them and tell them how they're supposed to fix a problem, that actually lowers our influence and it can get in the way of effective discipline. So I do highly recommend you go back and watch the video for effective communication because that gives you that plus effective consequences. If I were to pick, well, I like all the classes, but man, those really, really work together because you can have the best consequences and say it in a really harsh tone. And then I just almost like I canceled out the effective consequence. So I highly recommend watching that. Now, I want to raise responsible kids. What is responsibility? It's accepting our obligations. Obligations are the have-tos of life. You know what an obligation for me is as a mom? Cooking. Some of you love it and think it's so relaxing. For you, do not. Just like keeping up with life and oh my gosh, it's just so hard. Obligations are our have-tos. I have to go to work, even though I do love my job, because I want to have money to pay the bills and live in a house and have a car and have gas. So those are our have-tos. Some have-tos are being polite when I don't feel like it. For kids, have-tos would be saying sorry, would be doing their chores, would be taking care of their stuff, going to school and doing homework. They don't like get excited to do those things, but those are obligations. Kids always say, I can't wait till I'm a grown up and I can get to do whatever I want. I am still waiting for that version of adulthood. I have not found it yet. So obligations, that's part of responsibility. So what does that mean for us as parents? We have to require our kids to do some things that they don't want to do, as long as it's not like inappropriate and things like that. Doing chores is not inappropriate because as an adult, are they going to have to do chores? Are they going to have to do their laundry? Are they going to have to know how to clean? Yeah, they're going to have to know how to do that. Are they going to have to know how to turn things in on time if they have a job? Yeah, they're going to have to do that. So not only do we give them things that they have to do, what if they don't do it? We hold them accountable because another part of responsibility is accepting accountability for our actions. If a child chooses to not do their chore, then they choose the consequence that goes with that. If they choose to yell and scream when they're upset, then they choose the consequence for treating the adult disrespectfully. We have to teach them to accept accountability for their actions. And the only way we can teach them that is by letting them experience the consequences of their choices. And also part of responsibility is doing the right thing as the situation calls for it. Guess what? Kids learn how to do the right thing after they've done the wrong thing. That's how we learn as humans. We make mistakes and we learn and we grow, and we make mistakes and we learn and we grow. Even a scientist, they don't get their science experiments and their hypothesis ready the first time. It's mistake. That didn't work. Let's try a different way. That didn't work. Let's try a different way. That didn't work. Oh, this worked. That is how we learn and grow. So all of this, if I want to have a responsible adult someday, my child to grow into that, they have to have a combination of choices, but also consequences. Notice it's both. It's not all consequences, rules, 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 rules. It's not all choice. Do whatever you want. You're only a kid once. It's both boundaries and choices. That is what's going to develop responsibility. And there's no shortcuts to that. Now, there are different styles of discipline too. All right. So there's the long debate, punishment versus consequences. So when you hear the word discipline, think about what comes to your mind when you hear the word discipline. If I were thinking about growing up, if I think of the word discipline, I think of, getting in trouble or spanking or being grounded or things like that. Versus consequences. It doesn't mean that children have to love their consequences, but when we use effective ones like logical consequences, it's a better learning tool. So punishment basically is to teach by hurting. Discipline, the root word of discipline is to teach. So think about an effective athletic coach. They, through practice, can help uncover what are the weaknesses of the team. So let's say the team is really out of shape. So a disciplined coach is going to teach them, and it might not be comfortable the whole time. They might have to do some serious conditioning and a lot of running and a lot of weightlifting, which is not comfortable. But they're, not doing that for the sake of hurting them. They're doing that for the sake of teaching them and understanding where our weaknesses. Let's build those up, and let's also build on our strengths. Punishment is to teach by hurting. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean spanking. So you might be against spanking, but you might still use more punishment. Punishment is, I want to make them physically uncomfortable. I want to make them feel bad. Or the consequence is so harsh, like doing one thing wrong and now you're grounded for a whole month. That is where it's like we want them to suffer for their foolish choices. Logical consequences have a completely different approach, but boy, do they cause some serious thinking. All right. Now, why is punishment popular? It often works in the short run. Nobody wants to get in big, big trouble. Nobody wants to get a spanking. It's a lot for us. It's what we learn to do. There's so much debate today about what children need today is, or our kids today are out of control. And yes, our kids today are out of control. It's not for lack of spankings. It's for lack of discipline and effective consequences. There's too much freedom. So you can have discipline and really make a difference. Why does punishment backfire? Well, it can lead to a lot of resentment and retaliation. Nobody likes to be humiliated. Nobody likes to be screamed at. Nobody likes to be made to feel shame all the time. Nobody likes to have their bottom hurt from a spanking. Nobody likes to be grounded for a month for a simple thing, and that can lead to a lot of resentment because we have an innate ability to understand what's fair and what's not fair. Now, little kids think everything's unfair, that's their nature. But as we get older, preteens and teens, they understand what's fair and what's not fair. It can lead to a lot of sneaking, blaming, and excuse making. So think about it. If I tell the truth and I am in a punishment style household, what's the benefit of telling the truth? If on the other side of telling the truth, I'm going to have a huge consequence. I'm going to get spanked. I'm going to get screamed at and yelled at. You know what? If I lie, if I'm sneaky about it, if I'm able to blame somebody else, there's a chance I might not get the punishment. But if I tell the truth, I'm going to get punished. So why should I tell the truth? A lot of times you don't realize that sometimes we're almost training our kids to be more sneaky. And I can say this, I definitely learn to be very sneaky as a teenager. And the other thing too is it undermines the relationship. If the kind of discipline you use doesn't create an environment of emotional safety, it's hard for kids to separate the super harsh parent from the emotionally safe parent. So what I'm going to show you is you can have both. You can have relationship and you can have excellent, effective consequences. But understand the thing about punishment, the way that Dr. Sorrell, she's this amazing teacher in town. She said, we want to make children feel bad so that they'll do good. Think about yourself as an adult. How has shame worked for you? January's coming up. How many of you have made a New Year's resolution? A lot of times we make New Year's resolutions and goals for ourselves from a place of shame. Oh, I'm fat. I need to lose some weight. Oh, I'm out of shape. I need to do this. And how long does that resolution last? 3 weeks? That's the average. You know, shame is not a long-term healthy way to change behavior. Now, experiencing the consequences of our choices? Absolutely. So let's see what that might look like. Okay. Because discipline should be respectful. I do not lose any authority by being respectful and polite. I want to talk to my kids in the way that I want to be talked to. Let's say I need to get corrected at work by my boss and I work in a school system. So if my assistant principal marched into my office and said, Lauren, your office is a mess. Get off that computer right now and get this place cleaned up. This instant. If I had my adult boss talk to me that way, I might like not say anything and I might like rush to comply, but I'm going to be looking for another job. I'm going to resent them. I am not going to want to work hard for them. I am not going to appreciate being treated that way. If that's how we talk to our kids, it creates the same reaction. I do not lose any authority being in charge by being polite. I lose authority by yelling and screaming, actually. I lose authority by not following through and doing what I say I'm going to do. But I don't have to scream to do it. We can be respectful. Now, I'm not saying, okay, pretty please, will you do this? No, you can have authority. I call it my teacher voice, I mean business voice, but it's not aggressive, right? It allows for the child to participate. We'll talk about family meetings in a little bit, how you as a family can even help decide consequences for repeat behaviors and things like that. It's really helpful with teenagers. It should fit the situation. You know, if everything we do is over the top, super harsh, is that teaching them? It's not as effective. And it should be firm but not harsh. The goal is not suffering. The goal is let them experience, okay, as much as we can possibly create a situation, a consequence that fits, the better. Because no one in my adult life is running around and grounding me. No one in my adult life is running around and screaming at me and saying, give me your phone for a month. No one in your adult life is doing that. Now, if they continue to misuse their phone, then absolutely we can take that phone away. But, you know, if we have consequences that actually fit the situation, that are firm, but not the goal of making them suffer, that's where the teaching happens. They're allowed to be uncomfortable. That's okay. But it shouldn't hurt. It shouldn't be overwhelmed with shame. It shouldn't be too much because that can backfire. So with effective discipline, it kind of has a progression. So it doesn't have to start off with the big things. Start off with a progression. Just think about, a toddler. I'm going to, teach them things along the way. So it can start off with a polite request. Hey, please clean up this mess. Now, do I lose any authority by being polite, by saying, please clean up this mess? No. Now, if I walk into a room and I say, clean up this mess now, did I just talk in a way that invited them to participate? Or did I talk in a way that invited them to push back? You do not lose any authority by being polite. So please clean up this mess. Some of you are saying, well, that's not going to work for my child. Okay, now, guess what? If it doesn't work, if the polite request does not get them to do what you asked, then I'm going to follow through, and I can follow through. I'm going to move up the progression. So let's say that doesn't work. Then iMessages are everything. An iMessage is a very clear way to correct a behavior. All right. So an iMessage might sound like this. So please clean up this mess. We come back, the mess is not cleaned up. All right. I have a problem with the mess in the family room. I feel taken advantage of because I have to clean up the mess you made. I would like you to take the dishes to the kitchen. Will you do that? When will you do that? An iMessage is crystal clear. It's not, hey, get off your lazy butt and go put those dishes in the sink right this instant. No. Do I want to teach them empathy, how their behavior impacts another person? Yes. Do I want to still be polite but firm? Yes. So in iMessage, the formula is I have a problem with, I feel, because I would like you to. And you fill in the blanks. So in this situation, I have a problem with the mess in the family room. I feel taken advantage of because I have to clean up the mess you made. I would like you to take the dishes to the kitchen. Will you do that? When will you do that? If that doesn't work, you can move to a firm reminder, clean up now, or you can move straight to consequences. Now, let me explain something. This is not for behaviors that are, if they're doing the same thing over and over again, I don't have to give the same iMessage over and over again. Once I've established an expectation and they know what that expectation is, I can do a polite request or I can skip that completely and move straight to consequences because they already know what they're supposed to do. So, I have a friend who went to visit and there was a little brother and a big brother, and the big brother loved to make little brother cry. So they had a rule in the house, no potty words. You can't call someone a butt head or a poo-poo head or things like that. And they were younger. And so every day when we went to pick up the little kid, he would use a potty word to be like, oh, your breath smells like poop or something like that. Make little brother cry. And the mom would just give an iMessage. I have a problem with you using, language that makes your brother cry. I feel frustrated because he is sad now. I would like you to use kind words. Will you do that? Well, he got basically every single day for multiple days in a row, he got a free pass. He knew he got to get his brother to cry one time with no consequence because he already knew he wasn't supposed to do that. And mom would give the iMessage. She kind of got stuck in the iMessage. And so, getting stuck in the iMessage doesn't help. Now, he already knew he wasn't supposed to do that. She doesn't have to keep giving an iMessage. She can give a consequence. Oh, this is so sad. You made your brother cry by using potty words. When we get home, I think we're going to need a break from you. You can wait in your room while we go have some fun together. That way you won't be able to hurt his feelings if you're in your room. You don't have to say the same iMessage over and over and over again. But I want you to think about an iMessage, okay? So an iMessage, it's very effective, but it requires a little thinking. So think about it this way. If I walk into my son's room and I say, you're a slob, that might be 100% the truth. But think about it. Me saying you're a slob, is that going to create a brain environment that thinks, you know what, mom, you are right. I need to put my laundry away. I probably should get all those dishes down in the sink. I probably should make my bed and maybe put all my dirty laundry that's on the floor. I should probably put that in the hamper. Mom, you're right. I'm a slob. Let me get on that. No, but how many of us, that's what we do while correcting behavior. You're a slob. Stop being rude. Get off your lazy butt. We talk in a way that doesn't get anybody to think about anything. Now, an iMessage, I have a problem with, I feel because I would like you to, that's much more clear. So instead of, you're a slob, I might say, I have a problem with clothes being all over the floor instead of put in the hamper. I feel frustrated because I walk in the room and I can't even relax with stuff on the floor. I would like you to put your dirty clothes in the hamper. Will you do that, please? When will you do that? Did you know that iMessages can work on your sweetheart too? Did you know that? So instead of, oh, nice for you to sit around while I do the dishes, boy, that's really going to get them to want to help you do the dishes versus I have a problem with you sitting there after dinner while I'm jumping up and doing the dishes. I feel frustrated and overwhelmed because I have to do this all by myself and we both ate food. I would like you to bring your dishes to the sink and we need to figure out something to help us share dish duty. Will you do that? That's an iMessage. So I would love for you to on a piece of paper or right there by yourself, let's just take like 3 minutes to kind of look at what would an iMessage potentially be. And let me add a slide to this too, because I want to make sure you have the formula. because I did not put that in here. So the formula is let me copy this. Give me just a second. Dun, da, da, da. All right. All right. The formula is I have a problem with, and then a line. I feel, and then a line, because, and then you kind of fill in the blank. I would like you to. Okay. So that is the formula. So I want you to think about a problem you're having at home with your kids. How could you take that problem and turn it into an iMessage? So first step with me, I have a problem with, what is it? I feel, how do you feel? Frustrated, taken advantage of, disrespected? I don't know. Because, and explain why, and tell them what you want them to do. All right. So just take a couple minutes, see if you can write that down. And you are more than welcome to even share it in the chat section if you would like to do that. Because practice makes perfect. When I was first learning to do these, I would actually take the time to write it down, especially when I had frustrating repeat behavior with my kids. I also learned through text message that I can send iMessages through text message too to my teenagers. I could do that. Made a big deal. Made a big difference. Okay. So this is a great formula for you to use. So because we only have an hour, I'm going to keep on going, but I also want you to think about how you could use this in a positive way. So instead of I have a problem with, you can just say, I feel amazed and so proud because you help your sister when she's feeling bad. I would like you to keep doing that. Can you do that? We can use positive iMessages too. But before we react in anger, take some time to think about what's the main area right now that's causing you the most frustration with your child or children or sweetheart, and write down an iMessage about it. Create that opportunity for effective communication. Okay. So, polite requests, iMessages, firm reminders. That would be amazing if they worked all the time. They don't, because we're humans and we're stubborn. So let's say, what if it doesn't work? Okay. Then we can move to consequences. Now, effective consequences is what I'm talking about. So consequences are supposed to teach kids. I want my consequence to shine a giant spotlight on their choice. Consequence is not the grown-up being the big meanie and the killer of all things fun, and they're not fair. Nope. How I say my consequence, the kind of consequences I use, shine a giant spotlight on their choice, because misbehavior is a choice. I do understand that attention deficit disorder, other things that kids might have, anxiety, things like that, it can influence behavior. But even with attention deficit disorder, I want to put supports in place, but that doesn't mean I remove consequences. If my child struggles with being sensory overload, I want to put some supports in place, to help their environment and teach them coping skills, but it doesn't mean I remove all consequences, because consequences are also teachers too. So consequences are not bad. Now, consequences, effective consequences, there's several kinds. One of them is natural consequences. Let's say they break something because they weren't taking care of it. Well, the natural consequences, now it's broken and they don't get it. One of my sons struggled with anger, and he had his little Xbox and he was playing a game, and he got really mad because he lost a game, and he threw his controller, and his controller broke. Comes downstairs, Mom, I broke my controller. I got so mad. This didn't work. And will you take me to GameStop so I can get another controller? And I said, sure, I'll take you to GameStop. Do you have the money? No. Okay. Well, you let me know when you have the money and I will take you to GameStop. How long do you think it took him to have the money? Weeks. So he went weeks without getting to play his game because he made the choice to express his anger by throwing it and breaking it. I didn't have to say, well, if you weren't a ding dong and you shouldn't have thrown it in the first place, if you just managed your temper. I didn't have to say any of that. The natural consequence got to teach that. I didn't even have to create that happening. Let's say, I used to, my daughter would run down the concrete ramp outside of the pre-K building. And I would say, Sophia, don't run down the ramp. Don't run down the ramp. You might fall. Well, she fell. She scraped up her knee. That's a natural consequence for running. Now, if when I get up to her and I say, well, if you would have just listened to me, you wouldn't even have a boo-boo right now, would you? She would have run the next day and risked getting a boo-boo just to spite me. All right. Now, instead, I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. That must have really hurt. That's why I walked down that path because, man, I don't want to have my knee scraped up like that. I'm really sorry you're hurting. I can respond with empathy because she's already experiencing the consequence. So there are a lot of things that might naturally happen simply from their choices. Let the consequence do the teaching, not your lecture about it. They can connect the dots. Now, there's times we can't use natural consequences if it's too dangerous. For example, the natural consequence of not holding mommy's hand in the parking lot at Walmart might be you get run over by a car. I'm sorry, that situation is too dangerous, so we're not going to use natural consequences for that. Or the consequences are too far in the future. The big choices they're making now might not impact them for 10 years from now, so I can't just let the natural consequences do that. Or the natural consequences don't affect the child. So if the natural consequence of throwing my brother's toy is my brother's toy gets broken, well, that's not fair because it was my brother's toy, not my toy. So natural consequences, they can be great teachers if you don't ruin it with lecture. The one thing I love about the book Parenting with Love and Logic is it talks about, respond with empathy. They're already struggling and they're uncomfortable. I don't have to rub their nose in it. Just, I know you really like that controller. I know that's really hard to not be able to play your games for a few weeks. I know you'll figure it out. By responding with empathy, I keep the spotlight on their choice. The second I start to lecture them, well, if you controlled your temper and you didn't throw your controller, maybe we wouldn't have that problem. The spotlight went off of their choice and now it's on me. Now they can push all their anger towards me and all their blame towards me, and it's all my fault now in their minds. I'm not going to do that. I can respond with empathy. And it's not like, oh, this is so sad. No, they're suffering. I can acknowledge that. Let the consequence do the teaching. So that's natural consequences. Now, there are plenty of things where there has to be a logical consequence. So let me give you an example also of a natural consequence that actually turned out to be a game changer for my son. So my youngest son, when he was 16, he got a car. They all bought their own cars, worked really hard. And he got in a car accident. I think he got his car over the summer in June. And I think it was like the following November-ish, maybe December, somewhere in there. So he owned the car not quite for half a year. And the accident was his fault. He was going a little too fast, did not brake in time in the traffic on one of our major highways. And so he rear-ended someone, not to the point where cars were totaled, but it was his fault. He rear-ended them. He crunched his front bumper, broke the headlights, messed up his water pump, and broke his radiator. So now, very easy for me to show up to that car accident and just want to scream and yell. What were you thinking? Were you speeding? Da 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 da. Now, the natural consequence of him getting in a car wreck is multiple things. He doesn't have a working car. He's got to help pay for insurance now. He's got the inconvenience of this. He has to pay for that traffic ticket. These are all natural consequences as a result of his choice of driving a little bit too fast and not braking in time. Natural consequence. So I picked him up, no yelling. Hey, tell me what happened. I'm so glad you're safe. And as we're talking, he tells me what happens. And then I'm like, okay, now here's the deal. Your car's broken. It's wrecked. It's your responsibility to fix it. So cost, that was his responsibility. That was a natural consequence. Also, I need my car for work. So I need my car for work during the day. So you'll have to figure out rides to school and stuff like that if you don't want to take the bus. And then if you need it after school, we have to work that out. As long as I don't need it, you're welcome to use it, but you've got to pay for gas. All right. He had to pay for the ticket. He had to do these things. Now, did he have the money to fix the car? Nope, he did not. There was no yelling, there was no screaming, there was no shaming, there was no you foolish, dumb teenage boy. None of that. He's already experienced the consequences of his choices. Thankfully, he didn't experience the ultimate consequence of being physically hurt. And so from that, He watched YouTube videos. He went over to friends' houses. They fixed his car. They spent weekends under the car. He spent time with grandpa. He got close with our neighbor as they're replacing hoses. He learned how you can go to a junkyard and pull old parts off of cars so that you don't have to go buy a new part for your car. I mean, he learned so many skills and he discovered, I love fixing stuff. It's like a puzzle. And he didn't like school. He thought school was dumb and didn't serve a purpose because he's like, why am I having to do a language arts assignment? How's that going to help me in life? From this wreck, he learned his love of fixing stuff. He wound up going to trade school. Now he works on natural gas compression engines, is making money hand over fist. He's fantastic at what he does, works so hard, and he would have never discovered that if he hadn't experienced the natural consequence of the car wreck. Now, if I had yelled and screamed at him or rescued him from the consequences of that decision, he would have never learned those lessons. So, natural consequences can be great teachers, obviously, as long as it's not too dangerous. Now, what about when you can't find a natural consequence? Then, more effective consequence than just punishment, grounding, all that kind of stuff that doesn't fit. There is a time for grounding, don't get me wrong. That doesn't fit. A logical consequence is a discipline that's logically connected to a misbehavior that's applied by an authority. For example, you don't pick up your toys and saying it's leaving a mess in the family room, then I'm going to take your toys and I'm going to put them away and you can't have access to them for a week. So I don't have to worry about seeing them. Love and logic even has a logical consequence. You keep slamming your door in anger, then I'm going to remove the door from your room. You are rude to your sister, then you're going to have to pay your sister or do her chores or do something to make it right. How can we logically connect their misbehavior to a situation? So let me show you a video that kind of explains what that might look like. All right. So, because sometimes it can be, and when you give a logical consequence, you're going to form it in an either or. Either you do this or this is the consequence. We're letting them know our expectation. Or you can phrase it in a when then. When you do this, have to, then you get to do what you want. So it's when then or either or. Here's a video that gives an example of an either or choice. All right, so let me switch up my sounds and get this going.
Natural consequences can be powerful teaching tools for parents, but they aren't always our best option. We can't responsibly allow natural consequences to do the teaching in certain situations when the consequences are too dangerous, too far in the future, or don't affect the child. In these situations, we can turn to a method of discipline called logical consequences. In session 1, we saw how important it is to give our children choices as a method of preparing them to survive and thrive in our democratic society. But just as freedom allows for choice, it also carries with it consequences for those choices. Teaching our children responsibility means giving them choices and allowing them to experience the logical consequences of those choices. In fact, we can state it as a formula: R equals C plus C. Responsibility equals choice plus consequences. When parents use consequences that are logically connected to their children's misbehavior, like Laura finally did with Nicholas when he was coloring on the wall, and she had him clean it off, kids learn that they are responsible for their choices and behavior. There are two basic ways of providing kids with choices and logical consequences: an either-or choice or a when-then choice. The either-or choice is often used when you want your child to stop doing something. For example, to stop leaving his bike in the driveway.
Jordan, I still seem to have a problem with you leaving your bike in the driveway, son.
Oh, yeah, I'll move it.
You can move it this time, but I tell you what, you either put it back in the garage on your own, or I'm gonna have to lock it up for 3 days to help you remember. Okay? All right.
Sure, sounds great. I'll get my bike and meet you at 5. Oh, no.
That is a classic example of a either or choice. So let me see if I can get us back to, hold on. I got us to the wrong place. Now let me go back to my presentation. And, and moving right along. Okay, so here's where we could ruin that perfectly good consequence. He comes inside. Okay, so first off, let's think. Was that logically connected to leaving his bike in the driveway? Yes. If he, and he already told him, either you put your bike away without being asked, or I'm going to lock it up for 3 days to help you remember. He's basically removing his bike from being able to be used. That is logically connected to the misbehavior. Great. Okay. Now, when he gets the consequence, here's where parents ruin it. And this is something that the book Parenting with Love and Logic really hits hard. We have to respond with empathy. So let's say little Jordan comes running inside. Dad, I'm so sorry. I will never. Can I please have my bike? Please, please, please. And the dad, if he says, no, you cannot have your bike. I am sick and tired of cleaning that up after you. And I already told you. So no, you wouldn't argue about it. You're not going to have your bike for 5 days. Okay. Now, when you do that, when you respond with a lecture, they already know why the bike is locked up. When we shift into lecture mode because we're frustrated and we want them to suffer a little bit, that's a natural human thing to want to do. Where did the spotlight go? Instead of the spotlight being on his choice, he chose to leave the bike out in the driveway and not put it away. Now the spotlight shifts to me. Mom's mean. Dad's mean. They don't let me do stuff. This isn't fair. When I respond to lecture, it moves the spotlight. I don't want to do that. And here's the difference when you respond with empathy. I know you're really going to miss that bike. You like riding your bike. You'll get it back in 3 days. Keeps the focus on their choice. Now, let's say they want to argue about the consequence. Oh man, this really drains my energy when you argue with me. You're gonna have to figure out how to give me energy. Or, man, it really drains my energy when you argue with me. How about this? I'm going to charge you $1 a minute for as long as you argue, but you go ahead, argue away about why you should still have your bike. I'll start my timer. I mean, like, that's the one thing I love about the book Parenting with Love and Logic is they have all sorts of scenarios like that I'm like, I would never think of that. Now, it can be hard to think of consequences that logically connect to the misbehavior. So I've got one for you that is just wonderful. Now, here are some examples for like behavior. Let's say they throw their toys. The toy, logical consequence, toy can be in a timeout. They don't eat their dinner, logical consequence. They don't do the have to, then they don't get the want to. Of dessert, they hit a friend or sibling. The consequence, they have to apologize and give hugs. They're not doing anything else until they do that. Another one that I like for that is they hit a friend or sibling, especially a sibling, to give them energy back for hitting them, they might have to do their chores. They run into the street, consequence, you've got to hold my hand every time. They don't share their toys, then they're the last person to get to pick out a toy. They throw a temper tantrum. Well, you must be tired, so we're going to have to go do a rest time instead of going to the park because you're so tired you're throwing a temper tantrum. My daughter's teacher used this one. They use potty words like you stupid, you poo-poo head. The consequence in her 3-year-old classroom was, oh, I hear potty words. You must need to go to the bathroom. All right, go to the bathroom. You have potty words. Because if they use potty words, they had to go to the bathroom because they must need to go potty. And oh my gosh, it worked on her little 3-year-old brain. They won't take a nap. Okay, then they get to go to bed super early. They're disrespectful to a teacher. They might have to write a note of apology. And I like to add on to that, that really drains the teacher's energy. So I'm going to find ways that they can give that teacher energy back. I'll explain that in a minute. One of my sons colored on the back of the bus seat and got written up. And I got a call from the principal that he had taken a Sharpie marker and drawn drawings on the back of the bus seat. I took him with me to the bus barn and we cleaned every single seat in that bus. I didn't yell, I didn't lecture. He brought the supplies. I took him there. He cleaned every single seat in that bus. And he never wrote on the bus, like colored on the bus seats again. It logically connected. You mess this up, you clean this up. That's logical consequences. All right. Now, it can be hard to find a consequence that fits the crime. So this is another thing they have in Parenting with Love and Logic that is genius. It's called the energy drain. So the thought process behind this is misbehavior drains energy. Like when they irritate me, when they pick on their sibling, when they backtalk, when I have to remind them to do stuff, man, that really drains my energy. Now I'm going to give them the chance to give me energy back. Okay, so let me show the handout. Okay, energy drain. Let's make sure this is showing on your screen. All right, and I'm going to make it a little bit larger. Okay, so this is straight from Parenting with Love and Logic. So you start off with a strong dose of sympathy. Man, this is so sad. When you lie to me, it drains the energy right out of me. How are you planning on putting that energy back? Now, they might come up with an idea. I'll go do this. Well, if they don't come up with an idea, you get to come up with an idea. Let me give you a beautiful option. All right. So one option that you might have, let's see here, is where are my job cards? Oh, they're not up there. Let me pull them up. And all of these things will be emailed to you. Okay. So I love these job cards. There are 4 chores on every page. They are in English, they're not in Spanish. But there's 4 cards in every page. So an energy drain might start like this. Man, it really drains my energy when you argue with me. I'm going to need you to go pick 2 things out of the pile. That will give me energy back. So cleaning a sink is not directly connected to backtalk or, arguing. But when I say you arguing drains my energy, I need you to put some energy back, that creates the connection. I love these cards because they give you directions. Clean all the sinks. Gently scrub sinks with sponge and cleanser. Rinse and dry well. It has organizing the garage, raking leaves, vacuuming the kitchen floor, vacuuming the couch, vacuuming the car, sorting the laundry, sweeping the driveway, porch, and sidewalk, sorting out chores, cleaning garbage cans, cleaning kitchen cabinets. If my kids did these things, it would give me energy. So that creates a teachable cost. If they want to do things that are out of bounds, that creates a cost. Another great energy drain is when kids' siblings are picking on each other. We just did a class called Siblings Without Rivalry. Sibling rivalry, it should be, I don't know if the videos made it yet or not, on the Oklahoma Family Network YouTube channel. But sibling rivalry, if they're constantly pestering a sibling, man, this is so sad. When you keep pestering Sophia and irritating her, it really drains my energy and it drains her energy. You're going to need to do her chores tonight. That should give some energy. Like, create a cost for these things that are hard to come up with a consequence for. But the energy drain, it fits everything. It's amazing. For younger children, Parenting with Love and Logic recommends starting off with a phrase. Uh-oh. It's like a signal word. Uh-oh. And uh-oh. Man, when you do this, it really drains my energy. I had a mom who made a poster and she listed things that her son could do to give her energy back. After 6 weeks of consistently doing the energy drain, she'd say, uh-oh. And he'd say, don't say uh-oh, mommy, don't say uh-oh. Because he knew on the other side of uh-oh was a cost. You get to choose to be a stinker and uncooperative and argue and, complain. But there's going to be a cost for that. That drains my energy. You put energy back. And it actually sometimes can be easier to forgive your kids because they've actually done something that's helpful. So that is a really potentially great logical consequence that you might be able to use, the energy drain. I will email that to you, including a video in the email that Erin will send to you that has the presentation and then a bunch of extra handouts. I will also email those job cards. So energy drain is a great thing. All right. Now, when you're making logical consequences, you can even ask the child to help decide the consequence. What do you think the consequence should be for, not doing your homework? Ask them. You might be surprised. Make sure you put the consequence in the form of a choice. Either do this or this will happen, or when you do this, then you can do that. Make sure the consequence is logically connected. If you say things like, either you stop arguing or I'm taking your phone for a month. That there's not necessarily a connection there. But what if you made a connection? Man, you continue to argue with me. I'm wondering if you're watching a lot of videos on that phone of yours that maybe make you think that's okay. So I'm going to go ahead and remove that phone. And when you can start talking respectfully, I think you'll be able to handle having it back. Sometimes we ground kids from electronics. Make a bridge with your words. If they are, not doing their chores and doing anything, but they're constantly on their video games, man, this is so sad. Your chores aren't getting done. I'm having to constantly remind you, it seems like you're getting distracted by those video games. I'm going to go ahead and remove that distraction until you show me that you can keep up. So no video games this week. We'll try again this weekend and see if you're able to keep up with your responsibilities. It's not just you're grounded, you're this. Make a connection somehow. And that helps the logic help. Give choices you can live with. If you say things like either you put your toys away or I'm throwing them all away, don't say things when you're mad because you probably can't live with them not having any choice. Watch your tone of voice. Keep it firm but calm. The second you yell, that interferes with the effectiveness. Give the choice one time, then enforce it. When we constantly repeat ourselves and repeat ourselves and repeat ourselves, we're literally training our kids to not listen to us. So when I say either do this or this, and then I follow through every single time, guess what? They learn I'm going to mean it. All right. There's a handout I'll send you that talks about let your words be gold. If you say it, do it. And that consistency, that's going to teach more than any kind of yelling, any kind of screaming. And expect testing, especially from your teenagers, and give them a chance to try again. All right. So that's some things. Also, I'm a big believer in family meetings. We talked about family meetings in other classes that I've taught, but a family meeting is where we sit down and we get together and we talk through a situation. So I had a family meeting once about the trampoline because someone was always getting injured on the trampoline after a certain period of time. And I'm like, I'm tired of the injuries. So we came in together and I'm like, okay, guys, I've already given them iMessages. I have a problem with you guys playing too rough on the trampoline. I feel frustrated because someone keeps getting hurt. I would like you to, jump safely on the trampoline. Will you do that? Yes, we'll do that. Well, they didn't do that. All right, guys, time to have a meeting. All right, guys, I have a problem with all the injuries that keep happening on the trampoline. I feel frustrated because you can't go out to play without someone getting hurt. We're going to need to solve this problem. What's going on? What's happening? They all got to say, well, we're doing this. Turns out they were practicing their karate moves on the trampoline. That was the problem. On each other. That was the problem. I think they'd watch Spy Kids or something like that, the movie. So they're practicing their karate moves. So we had to come up with some guidelines. All right, how can you guys still practice your karate moves without people getting hurt? All right, well, one person at a time, or you can jump together as long as no one's doing karate. Okay, great. They help come up with that guideline. What's the consequence? All right, what if someone doesn't follow the rules? What should the consequence be? One of my sons said they should never get to jump on the trampoline for the rest of their life. He was the younger brother. Imagine that. The one who kept getting hurt. Well, that was an option. Okay, that's one option. What's another consequence that might work? And we settled on if you do that, then you're not going to be able to jump on the trampoline for the rest of the day. If it keeps happening, you're not going to be allowed to jump on it for a week. We came up with those consequences together. We've had family meetings about keeping the front area clean and hanging up your backpacks. We've had family meetings about what are our rules for using the video games and getting our chores done. We've had family meetings for lots of things. Family meetings are a great way to set up expectations, even together come up with consequences and effectively deal with that. What a great tool. That's what I want at my job. I want to have a staff meeting if we have problems. I don't want to get yelled at in front of everybody. Use family meetings, and I will send you handouts that go with that. Okay. So that gives you some ways to start with. But the key is try to use logical consequences. The follow-up handouts will give you even more details because I could talk about this for 17 hours straight. But hopefully that gives you just a different way of thinking. My children don't have to suffer, and it doesn't have to be overly harsh to get the point across. Let them experience the consequences of their choices. I'm going to keep my voice firm and calm. I'm going to give that expectation one time, and I'm going to enforce it. I'm going to learn how to use iMessages. I have a problem because I would like you to. Use those iMessages. All of these things together create an environment for effective discipline. Now, let's say you're going to have to be making a big change. You're like, I haven't used logical consequences. You're not going to be able to do that in every area. So recommendation, pick one super frustrating area right now. Maybe it's bedtime battles. Maybe it's how the kids treat each other in the car. I don't know. You pick your most frustrating thing, and then I want you to come up with your plan. What's your polite request going to be? What is your I message going to be? Are you going to have a family meeting about it and talk through, what the problem is and the consequences? What are the consequences, logical consequences going to be? Come up with a game plan. If I was a child, how would I get out of this consequence? What might I do? If they argue with me, what energy drain consequence would I use? Come up with your plan and practice that plan in one area. All right. Get some practice, get some traction, and then it can start to expand out. Because sometimes kids will just be like, can't you just yell at me? I can get this over with. Let them experience the consequences of their choices. All right. Effective. Now, on this, I've also included a link to the Oklahoma Family Network website. But I wanted to show you, we've got some classes coming up in December. So let's see. Let me copy this and put it up here. There are some classes coming up in December that you might want to check out. Let me see if that's showing on the screen. It is. So if you go to the website and you click on events, it will actually show you all the different events that are coming up in stuff. So they've got all sorts of things that are coming up. We've got setting goals for the new year is another class I'm going to teach. We've got developing a growth mindset on December 2nd. That's one of my favorite topics. And then there's also the Oklahoma Family Network YouTube channel that has tons of not just classes that I've taught, but like other speakers they've had that they record. And it's just like a plethora of amazing information. And you can look back through other classes that they've had from other experts and other people that might really help you learn some things. But all of this will be sent to you, and I really appreciate your time and allowing us to go a little over since we had to start a little late with our translation issue. Okay, that is all I have, Erin. So
Thank you
go ahead.
so much, Lauren. That was phenomenal. And you can tell because everybody stayed with you. So you always do such a great job. And thank you for being OFN's biggest supporter and showing our website. Please, we will send all of this to you guys. And again, appreciate you. Sorry for the we're trying to get it every time we get a little bit better, but we're working on the translation stuff. But so glad we can have our Spanish speaking families join us as well. So thank you very much, and everybody have a great evening. Bye-bye.
Bye, Erin.